The death penalty is one of the most polarizing topics in today's world, raising crucial questions about justice, morality, and human rights. In some countries, like the United States, it's viewed as a necessary punishment for the most heinous crimes. Meanwhile, other nations, such as those in the European Union, have completely abolished it, considering it an outdated and inhumane practice. But does capital punishment truly deter crime? And how do different countries implement such a drastic measure in such varied ways? Let's dive deeper into this global debate and explore the contrasts in how death sentences are carried out across the world. If you're passionate about understanding justice and human rights, hit that subscribe button. There's more engaging content coming your way, and you won't want to miss it. Global distribution of the death penalty. The death penalty is a highly divisive issue, with 109 countries abolishing it as of January 2021, including the entire European Union, the UK, Canada, and Australia. On the other hand, 55 countries still enforce capital punishment, such as the United States, China, and Saudi Arabia. This global split reflects how diverse the perceptions of justice are. Countries that have abolished the death penalty argue that it violates human rights and is not effective in reducing crime, while those that maintain it see it as a vital part of their legal systems, especially for serious offenses. The application of the death penalty varies immensely. In the United States, it's still legal in several states, though its use has decreased over time. China is known for its secrecy regarding the number of executions, but is estimated to carry out more executions than all other countries combined. In Saudi Arabia, public executions are not uncommon, often for crimes like drug trafficking or apostasy. This stark contrast shows how different cultural and social norms shape the way capital punishment is viewed and implemented worldwide. This divide goes beyond just legal frameworks. It highlights how societies value life, punishment, and rehabilitation. The countries that have abolished the death penalty often take a more progressive stance, focusing on reform rather than retribution. Yet, in nations where capital punishment remains, it is still seen as a necessary tool for maintaining law and order. Crimes punishable by death. The crimes that warrant the death penalty vary significantly across the globe, illustrating cultural and legal differences. In the United States, 42 different offenses, including murder and treason, can result in capital punishment. Although these crimes are severe, the actual use of the death penalty has been declining due to growing public opposition and legal hurdles. In Japan, the criteria for executing someone are more stringent, typically reserved for mass killings or exceptionally cruel acts. Some countries, however, apply the death penalty for lesser crimes by Western standards. In North Korea, acts like smuggling or consuming foreign media can lead to execution. This stark difference shows how diverse each nation's interpretation of a capital crime can be, influenced by political regimes and religious beliefs. For example, in Iran, drug trafficking or adultery can be punishable by death, which frequently draws criticism from international human rights organizations. The wide variety of crimes eligible for capital punishment demonstrates how the concept of justice varies significantly. In some places, it's reserved only for the most heinous offenses, while in others, even non-violent crimes can lead to execution. These global discrepancies highlight an ongoing debate about what truly warrants the ultimate punishment. Conditions on death row. Conditions for death row inmates vary widely depending on the country, reflecting different prison systems and societal views on punishment. In the United States, inmates often spend over 20 years in isolated cells, leading to severe psychological and physical deterioration. These small, often windowless spaces are harsh, and many inmates experience severe mental health issues during their long wait for execution. In Japan, death row prisoners live under strict isolation. But what makes their experience particularly harrowing is that they are not informed of their execution date until the morning it is set to happen. This method of keeping inmates in a constant state of uncertainty has been heavily criticized by human rights groups. Meanwhile, in countries like India and Vietnam, overcrowded prisons with minimal resources create even harsher living conditions for those awaiting execution. These varying conditions shed light on how different countries perceive the treatment of condemned prisoners. While some argue that the severity of death row conditions is part of the punishment, others contend that it constitutes cruel and unusual punishment, raising serious ethical concerns. If this discussion is helping you see the death penalty in a new light, give this video a like and share it with your friends. Your voice matters in keeping this conversation alive. Waiting time until execution. The time inmates spend on death row can be as psychologically taxing as the sentence itself. In the United States, the average wait time between sentencing and execution is a staggering 22 years, largely due to the lengthy appeals process designed to prevent wrongful executions. This prolonged waiting period can be seen as both a safeguard against judicial errors and a form of mental torture for inmates who live in uncertainty for decades. In Japan, the uncertainty is even more intense. Prisoners are only informed of their execution on the day it occurs, a practice that many consider inhumane. In China, on the other hand, executions are carried out swiftly, usually within 50 days of sentencing. This quick turnaround reflects the Chinese government's emphasis on efficiency and control over the legal process. The disparity in waiting times between countries raises questions about the balance between thorough judicial processes and the mental health of those on death row. While some argue that lengthy delays help prevent miscarriages of justice, others see them as an additional form of punishment in themselves. Last meal tradition. The tradition of allowing inmates to choose their last meal before execution is one of the few remaining gestures of humanity in the process. In the United States, prisoners are often granted this request, with some choosing elaborate meals, although there are limits. In Texas, however, this tradition was revoked in 2011 after an inmate's extravagant request went untouched, sparking controversy. In places like Indonesia and Malaysia, last meals are a much simpler affair, often chosen for the prisoner rather than requested. In Japan, prisoners are typically given a traditional meal before execution, but the ritual lacks the personal choice found in Western practices. The variation in how this final request is handled speaks volumes about the differing cultural views on dignity in the face of death. Though it may seem like a small detail in the grand scheme of capital punishment, the concept of a last meal highlights the tension between dehumanization and final moments of control in the lives of those condemned. Exceptions to the death penalty. Many countries have specific exceptions to capital punishment that reflect humanitarian concerns. In the United States, for instance, the Supreme Court ruled that individuals with intellectual disabilities cannot be executed. This ruling is part of a broader effort to ensure that the death penalty is not applied to those who may not fully understand the consequences of their actions. Additionally, certain U.S. states exempt pregnant women and people over 75 from execution. In some Middle Eastern countries, Islamic law prevents the execution of pregnant women until after they give birth, a practice aimed at protecting the unborn child. In countries like Iran and Sudan, there are also exemptions for minors and, in some cases, elderly individuals. These exceptions are rooted in cultural, religious, and ethical principles that seek to balance punishment with mercy. While these exceptions provide a degree of protection for vulnerable populations, not all countries follow such guidelines, as seen in places like North Korea. The existence of these exceptions highlights the ongoing global debate about the ethical application of the death penalty. The death penalty continues to stir global debate, with varying approaches across cultures and legal systems. For some, it represents justice for the worst crimes, while for others, it's seen as a violation of fundamental human rights. As you reflect on what you've learned, consider this. Is the death penalty a necessary evil, or has the time come for it to be abolished entirely? Your thoughts on this subject could shape the future of criminal justice. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking content on justice and human rights. Knowledge is the key to making informed decisions about the world we live in.